All right, there we go. We're live. Sick. Okay, now I just gotta fix up some random shit. Perfect. We're going live on TikTok too, like always. And here we go. All right, so today we're gonna start off with some practice on faces. For reference, I'm just using an art book that I have, but hopefully we can walk through some of the tips and tricks that I've been learning with faces and how to get them to be accurate, but also sort of copying the art style that I'm looking at. So to start off with, we're just going to start with a normal circle, nothing crazy. One thing that I've learned is whenever you're starting a face or whenever you're practicing faces, like pretty much as long as you can break the face into 3 parts, like that middle line, this quarter line, and then an 1/8 line, it sort of sets up everything like your face as it's going to be. Like all of the facial details are going to be about in this region of the circle, and they're going to coincide with these sort of tiers and list items. So we know that this top line is going to be usually where the eyes are, and then this bottom line is going to be about the bottom of the nose, and then this line is pretty much only going to be mouth, and then your chin will lay at this bottom edge, and then all of your hair and everything are going to live up here, right? So when you're starting a drawing with sort of all of these structures and frameworks and whatever, it's good and smart to just lay in simple shapes everywhere that you think your drawing is going to end up. So I usually like to do a triangle for the nose, and then 2 ovals pretty much right next to that triangle nose that we put. Something to remember as you're drawing is proportions really matter. So when you are drawing a face like this, something I always remember is the head is about 5 eyes long. So like there's going to be 5 sections of that width across, right? And so then with that, the nose can never be wider than the full width of an eye. So then you can never draw a nose that's too big or too small, right? As long as you're using that method of, okay, I know that this nose has to be right here, but how wide do I make it? If you have sort of an idea of how big your eyes are going to be, you know exactly how big your nose should be. So with that, we have this sort of oval here, and you can see if I'm using my pencil just as like a sizing source, I know that the eye is about that big, right? So then the nose is exactly that same size, right? And so we know with all of that sort of structure that we set up, the nostrils are going to have to be about right there. And then the point of the nose is going to be about there. And again, we're laying in structure. We're not actually drawing yet, right? That's kind of a confusing way to put it, or like a confusing idea to know when you're drawing, but you have basically all of these little light lines are not the drawing. They're just for you and your brain to understand where you need things to be. So it's like we can spend 5 minutes doing all of these little light drawings, and then when we actually feel ready and confident to put in lines, that's when you can start doing like the detail and making sure this thing looks realistic and fun and whatever. Hey everybody. But like for now, all we're doing is we're just focusing on, does this look at least a little bit realistic? And from there, we can start adding in some crazy detail and making it look realistic and all those things. And a good showcase of that is I've drawn in these eyes, I've drawn in the nose. I know that like all of the widths are correct because I'm following that rule of the nose can never be wider than one of the eyes, right? And I'm looking at where I put my sort of initial mouth line for this piece, and I'm seeing it's pretty far away from the bottom of the nose. Like if you look at your face in the mirror, you can see that it's really probably an eye width from the bottom of the nose to the top of the lip. So again, we can take this same eye measurement that we've been using the whole time, and we can sort of understand it's about that width. So we know that the eye, or we know that the lips are going to start about there instead of this line that I had put previously. So again, without drawing anything final, we're just going to put in some sort of indication that that's where our mouth is going to be. And then when we move into that sort of detail section, or when we move into really focusing on making this drawing look good, we know that this is at least our boundary. Like this sort of area on the face should be the mouth. And when we take a step back from that and we really think about it and look at it, we can see that it doesn't look horribly wrong, right? And so that's sort of the power of all of this structure drawing and this pre-drawing, is because you're learning. Here, I'll give you a better view. You're learning and you're teaching your own eyes like what looks correct and what looks wrong, right? So as we're going, I haven't put any sort of detail into this, but we can sort of already know that this is a face and it's going to turn out at least fairly realistic. So then we'll throw in just an indication for eyes. And as you're drawing this, like the eyes and everything will change, or the ears and everything will change as your face shape comes to form, but ears generally start at the eye, usually at the middle of the eye, and they go to the bottom of the nose. So that's another reference point you can do, and you can draw on this pre-drawing section that tells you, the eyes and the nose can't be that far apart because the ears have to be this size. So then you'll never get, a crazy drawing where the ear is super long or super big or super small, because you know that it has to at least link up with that reference point of the eye and that reference point of the nose. So with that, we can sort of start etching in a little bit of the actual face that we're going for. We'll give this guy a fairly strong jawline. And for whenever you're drawing jawlines and everything, you want basically a straight line from that ear down to about the mouth, and then that's when the jaw really starts to curve into a point of the chin. So again, we're not drawing anything permanent yet. We're just laying in very light lines, very light detail, and we're trying to figure out how we can make this look realistic when we do move into that detail section of the drawing. Another thing too is people have cheekbones, so when you are drawing face shapes or head shapes, it's good to just put in a slight indication that the face moves in a little bit, because if you're looking at someone's face, right, you can see mine in the mirror, like from here up, like this is all essentially one plane, and then everything else you're drawing is going away from the viewer, right? Like the perspective changes because the face moves away. It's a 3D object. So like this part of the face is going to face us directly, but then everywhere else on the head is that side of the head part. So it's moving away from us. We can still see it, but it's going to be squished and warped. If we drew it without that perspective, the face would be super wide, right? So we want to stay away from that. So just as sort of an indication, I'm going to draw that rectangle, and then you can see if we made it a box, like this box would look like this, where the two sides of the box are moving away from us, and on these planes, that's where you're going to find the ears, and the chin is going to stick out from there, and you have that jawline that kind of fits. So then those cheekbones are going to be in that front plane that we see, and then everything else is going to be at the back of the head or the side of the head moving away, if that makes sense. But I'm feeling pretty comfortable with how this face is turning out so far, so we're going to start moving into a little bit of detail, a little bit of darker lines. So eyes are generally that sort of classic almond shape that we always see. But an interesting thing about the eye is it's a ball, right? It's a sphere inside of your sort of eyelids and your eye cavity, right? So a good thing to remember is when you're drawing these eyes to add a little bit of color or darkness on these 2 points, because the eye is just the sphere inside of that almond shape eyelid, right? So it gives it a lot more realism when you have that sort of that empty spot or that dark spot in the eye, because no one's eyes are actually shaped like almonds. It's just the eyelid that gives it that shape, and then everything else just fits inside of that little almond, right? So we have those 2 eyes. Again, every time that I'm laying in these sort of details or what I'm claiming is like possible permanent lines, every time I do that, I take a step back and I want to check and make sure, is this correct? Like, am I am I messing up the drawing by adding this line? Because this is the point you want to erase if you need. If you get too far into the drawing and you're like really hustling or really putting in all these permanent lines and drawing almost like a cartoonist would, and you get to a point where you want to erase it, you have to erase pretty much the whole drawing. And the lines are going to be really dark and really deep. So when you are erasing it, it's not actually going to come out the way that you want it to. So this sort of back and forth of lay in a couple lines, take a step back, take a beat, look at it, and then go back in is always going to help you when you're drawing, and it's always going to make your drawings look better. And just like more professional at the same time. Like when you have a bunch of mess ups in your drawing, people see it. Like everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people can understand when something looks off because like they spend their whole day looking at stuff, right? So when something is a little bit wrong or something isn't quite what they think it should be, like their eye just directly zooms towards that point. So as you're drawing and as you're sort of figuring these things out, you have to remember that you're not just drawing from imagination, or you're not just drawing to make something cool, you're also drawing to make sure that whoever's looking at your drawing or whoever's looking at your piece can see it, understand it, and like enjoy what you're drawing instead of having their eyes focus in on some random little mistake that you made. And then moving forward from that, you'll see that I put these two sort of arc lines over the eyes, and that's for the eyebrow bone. So another really fun part about drawing, or a really smart way to go about drawing, is if you take the second and you learn about the skull shape and like draw a couple skulls before you start moving into real faces, you'll understand that there are like cavities and there are little spots where shadows will accumulate, and there are spots where the skin stretches a certain way. Like the cheekbones are a great example, and the brow bones are a great example. Like the eyes are inset in your skull, right? So of course, if the sun is coming top down, because my eyes are further in than my eyebrow, this whole part of the face is going to have shadow, right? And then same with a lot of the noses, a lot of the planes of the nose are in shadow, or they're darker than the other spots. So as you're drawing, if you understand that anatomy, you can sort of know that there is going to be an extra bit of shadow above the eye. The eyelid and the eye itself might not always catch that shadow, but the eyebrow bone is always going to cast some amount of shadow on the person. And obviously there are some times when someone or some character that you're drawing won't have that sort of intense eyebrow bone, or maybe they'll have like a slightly flatter face. But there's still always going to be that little bit of shadow, just because that's how skulls look, and that's how skulls are made up. Like they have divots, they have movement, they have shelves, everything like that. And then further from that, as you're going along and you're drawing these sort of shelves and these bone structure parts, like the eyebrow bone, it sets you up for like a perfect placement of your eyebrow, because the eyebrow is always going to be right on that top edge of that brow bone. So when you're doing this and you're working through all these little shadows and all these little shelves, you know that the eyebrow has to be at least pretty close to that line that you draw. So that's another trick of pre-drawing, is when you're laying in these sort of small little details that you don't think are important, they help you keep drawing at your best ability further down the line. Like we're only setting up and we're only doing all of these super light lines and pre-drawing lines, so that further from this later in the drawing, I can go in and very decisively put in the detail that I want. So with that, we have a pretty solid eyebrow. We might even just add in some extra hairs there to make it look a little bit more realistic. And because we have these two brow bones already drawn and these eyebrows drawn, we know that the nose is going to start from here and work its way down into that sort of bottom section that we already set up. So from here, we can just put in a little bit of detail, a little bit of indication of that top line edge of the nose, and then we can add in just a little bit of shading on each side of the nose to prove that it's sort of stretching out towards the viewer, right? And again, this all comes from the little addition of that brow bone that I added in is the only reason that we're getting these sort of solid lines around the nose, the eyebrows, and the eyes. So then now that I have this detail, I can come in here and add in just a small indication of nostrils. And then those nostrils are going to prove and show us where these, sort of the outside of the nostril is going to be. And you can just sort of slightly add those in, add a little bit of detail. You can add just a little bit of shadow underneath this nose to make it look a little bit more realistic. Nothing crazy though, we're still in that sort of pre-drawing phase. And then from here we have like the perfect setup to start these lips. And another fun thing to remember with lips is basically they're all just value. Like lips will never have an outline to them. The only hard line you'll ever see on a pair of lips is the line that splits the top lip and the bottom lip. Everything else is just a shade of pink in real life. So when you're drawing in pencil, it's just going to be a shade of gray, right? Or whatever color pencil you're using. But from this, we have just this sort of dark, it almost looks like a mustache. When you start drawing lips, it feels and it looks like you're just drawing a mustache on a person immediately. But once you start adding in the detail, like this solid black line for in between the lips, we'll draw that in right there. Another fun part or another little lesson about lips is the end of the lips will always be sort of at the same spot of the pupils. So you can, if you remember that, this pupil, the ends of the lips have to line up with the middles of the eyes. So there's again another little trick and another little piece to remember as you're drawing all these things that's going to make our drawing pop a bit more and look more realistic as we're sort of finishing it. But we know that the bottom lip is going to catch a lot more sunlight than this top lip, so we really only have to draw that bottom shadow. And as you can see, like all of that pre-drawing is slowly getting us to the point where we can start adding in some real detail on this face, and we can start darkening up lines, and we can start making this look realistic because we've done all of the sort of heavy lifting of the pre-drawing before. So I'm going to start going in with the irises. And the irises are just big discs of color. Usually they touch both edges, the top and bottom edge of the eyelids, but sometimes you have some white space under them depending on where the eyes are looking. So we're just going to color in right like that. And then if you really want to, you can put in pupils, but I usually just leave these like this because I'm sketching. I'm not trying to make something super beautiful. I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way to draw a face, and I'm practicing. So I'll color in the irises and I'll leave it like that. And then basically from there, all we really have to do is knock down and nail down how we want our head shape to be. So I'm going to give this person a little bit of a cheekbone structure, and then that jawline I was talking about, I was pretty happy with, so we're going to keep that there. And again, remember when I was talking about how the face is sort of that front rectangle that we drew here, and then everything else is on those sort of side planes of the face? We can remember that, and we can just sort of add in a little bit of shadow on the sides of everything because we know this face is moving away from us. And then now with that, we have a really good indication of where we want our ears to be. So we'll just throw in a little bit of an indication of the ear canals. And again, the ear goes from the eyeball to the nose. So if you remember that, you'll never really draw an ear that looks off, or at least like you'll have a way better shot at drawing it. And already see with this one, I sort of got ahead of myself and I drew it a little bit too low, but since we're still in this pre-drawing phase, I can erase that, I can fix up that jawline, and then I can draw this ear where it needs to go, which is about right there. And then I can just fill in that same detail that I just had, and there we go, that ear is fixed perfectly. And then basically from here, the rest of the drawing is just sort of adding in those shadows for cheekbones, if your character has cheekbones, adding in a little bit of shadow underneath the eyes, and basically just adding all of the tips and tricks that's going to make this drawing look more dramatic and maybe more realistic. some eye lines, some wrinkles, all of the little fun details. And like already, we're just playing, we're just like focusing on pre-drawing, and we already have like a pretty realistic face. I don't know if it, I don't know if I'd call it the prettiest face ever, but it works and it looks pretty realistic, and you can sort of tell just from looking at it, like blindly, you can tell that it's a face and you know it's a human and it doesn't look wrong. That's sort of the goal that I'm always striving for is, can I draw something and can I make it look perfectly recognizable, so if anyone looks at my drawing, can they understand that I was going for a human face on this one? Or if I'm drawing an animal, will they understand what animal it is? Like, it's all just sort of little tips and tricks, figuring out how to make everything look realistic and fit your sort of imagination that you had going into the drawing. And then for the hair, you can really just freestyle hair a lot of the times. It's not super important. A lot of people struggle with hair. I struggle with hair every once in a while. But it's really just sort of put a bunch of lumpy objects on top of a head and then shade it and figure it out. And it'll usually turn out fine, especially with a face. Like, the focal point are all of the facial details, not really the hair. So when you're moving through random wafts of hair and whatever, like, don't take it too seriously, because it's not going to ruin the drawing. You're just going to add a hairstyle to the drawing, right? And then from here, we can add in a little bit of shadow, maybe a little bit of shadow underneath the hair, like it's casting something. And then we can add in maybe a little bit of age lines there too, but like, that's at least a realistic looking face, which is the goal of today. It's just practicing faces and figuring things out. And so now, as we're going along, we can sort of start playing, and you can start doing cartoon faces, and you can start sort of really working and doing things from imagination instead of just like really following the structured form. So we can draw pretty much whoever we want to. We can start again with another oval. This time I'm going to have this drawing sort of a little bit angled. So again, I'm going to go down with that middle line, and already see with all this pre-drawing, I know that line was a little bit too high for me because I want it to be in the middle of this oval. So I'm going to cut back, and I'm going to draw it just a little bit lower on the head, and that's going to be my middle line. The face is going to be angled a little bit down to the right. For the nose, again, we're still following that same like half, and half. And then remember, in this drawing, I put that half line here. Here, I'll just draw these lines here again so we all know what I'm talking about. So these are like the 3 guiding lines that I had to draw this face. And if you remember, as I was drawing this one, the lips were a little bit too low. So on this one, I'm going to purposely draw this line a little bit higher up, so that when I am going into finishing this drawing or setting up this drawing, I remember that the lips are probably going to be a little bit higher this time because they were a little bit higher that time. So for this drawing, again, we'll put in sort of an indication of eyes, and now that the nose is going to be sort of at an angle, we're going to see a different side of it, right? So we're going to see the sort of full left side and then a little bit of the front. And so as you're drawing all of these pre-drawing spots, it's really important to draw the simple shapes first, and like all of the setup shapes, so all of the planes of an object. Basically, if you think of every single object as you're drawing as either a sphere, like a 3D sphere, or a box, or a triangular prism, like everything you draw that's in 3D is going to be either a box, like a rectangular prism, or like a sphere with shading detail, right? So as long as you remember these 3 shapes, like everything sort of starts falling into place. Like this nose, I'll darken up these lines a little bit so we can see, but this is just a little pyramid or a little triangular prism or triangle or whatever you want to call it. Like this shape is exactly what the nose is going to be. So we know that there's sort of an angle to this face. Like we're going to be able to see this side of the head of whoever I'm drawing, and then we're going to be able to see this rectangle of the face, and then we're not going to see this far right side of the head, right? Because we're at an angle, so we're only going to see these two halves. So moving back with that nose, we can sort of just start playing with a little bit of the shape that we're going for. And again, we're doing all of the same things that we did on this one. We're just laying out little bit by bit. Because it's at an angle, we're going to see a lot more nostril. With these ones, we can only see the sort of the front edges of the nostril. But with this one, we're going to see basically like the whole, like this is all the one nostril, and then this is the front of the nose as depicted by that front piece of the triangle, right? Is that making sense? So we have that sort of line, and it's going to cave in, and then we're going to see pretty much that whole nostril. And then going back up to the eyes, because I like this nose that I've drawn so far, we know that the eyes can't be wider than the nose. The human face is about 5 eyes wide, so we have like one width there, one width of the eye, one width of the nose, and so on. So we know that this nose, I'm pretty comfortable with it being in the final drawing, so the eye can only be that long, right? So I'm just going to set up little indications of where I want the eye to be. Same thing on this side. And then the fun part about drawing at an angle, or like having this face turned down a little bit instead of having it straight on like this one, is this eye is going to be a little bit smaller because it's a little bit further away from us. So we're even just going to take in a little bit from both edges. And then this guy, or this eye, is going to be a little bit wider, and we're going to see it closer to the nose, because when you turn something away, all of the eye, nose, and eye get squished together just a little bit, right? Because you're at an angle instead of just straight on like that. So with that being said, we'll throw in just a little indication of a top eyelid and a bottom eyelid. And then same thing with this one, it's going to be a little bit smaller and a little bit lower. So we're just going to do a top and a bottom eyelid just to make sure that we're on pace. This nose looks pretty solid. Now we're going to move on to the eye. Again, remember, the mouth always goes from pupil to pupil. That's about how wide every single mouth is. Obviously, some people are different, but we can put a line there and we can put a line there, and we know that the mouth has to be about that wide, right? So we'll just put in a line right there. We'll make them just like a little bit smiley. This drawing, I'm going to go a little bit more cartoony, so I'm not going to draw the lips on it. And we can sort of start putting in a little bit of a shadow for this nose, just to give us a little bit more idea of where everything lays, how the sun is hitting him. And then we can go back up to the eye and put in a little bit more of a permanent line there, a little bit more of a permanent line there. Again, we're playing very slowly and very safely, because as we're going, this is still the part where we can erase. We can still sort of figure things out, and we can still change things. Once you start really going into a ton of detail and pressing really hard with your pencil, that's when you start losing the ability to erase. And then I'm thinking for this guy, we'll add some glasses on him just to make it a little bit more interesting. So glasses are always going to hit on that side plane of the nose. So I'm thankful that we drew out all these planes, because I know that the glasses line has to be about in the middle of that little side triangle that I drew, right? So we're going to have the glasses swoop down like that and then back up, just like a very normal glasses shape. We're not going for anything too crazy. And then I'm pretty comfortable with that, so I'm going to darken it up, and that's just going to give us a better representation and a better understanding of where that glasses is going to be. And then for this one, because the nose is angled towards or away from us, right, it's going to end up covering a little bit of that glasses shape. So same shape, but this time, instead of going all the way down like that, the glasses are going to end right at that bulge of the nose, and then they're going to continue at that same height that we just drew right here, and then they're going to continue a little bit off of the face, right? So then we can draw that top edge and darken that up a little bit too, because I like the way it looks. And then we can draw in that little arch over the nose. And like those glasses and those eyes and the mouth and the nose, everything looks pretty accurate, right? Like all we're doing is trying to get things to look fairly solid in this phase, and then when we're adding in all of the fun detail and all of like the sweet stuff, that's when we can really start focusing in on adding the detail. So with this guy, we'll add in his pupils. Just a nice man with glasses. And then we can add maybe a little bit of age line, just nothing too serious, but just like little things to make our drawing a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun. And then we can move on to drafting his head, which is going to be sweet. So with this, remember I said that these glasses are going to be, you're giving your knowledge away for free. Yeah, I am, Chili Belly. I'm just chilling. I'm doing this for fun. It's practice and it's fun. That's the whole reason. Hey Brad, how's it going? So like I said with the glasses, they're sticking away from the face just a little bit. So as we're drawing this top of the head, we can use this guideline that we already set up previously, but we know that this far line of the head cannot be past the glasses, right? Because it's at an angle. And if you look at me in the mirror, like if I'm turning my head, you see how this side of the glasses goes way past my head? Can you even see that? Like you can see through my glasses to the back wall. So we're mimicking that same thing, but in the drawing. So we know that the head has to start about there. So we're just going to very lightly add in just sort of a top line head. Nothing too permanent yet, because again, like with all of this pre-drawing we're doing, we want to make sure that at any point we can erase what we're doing and move on to something else, right? So we have that top line, that head. We're going to make this guy bald. And then that still lines up with that pre-drawing oval that we had in the very beginning. So what we can do is we can continue that line because it feels comfortable. And then right when we get to the mouth, that's when we're going to start drawing in his jawline. And I think this guy, we're going to give him a pretty strong jawline, and we're going to give him a pretty big chin too. So we'll draw in that sort of, that bottom line for the chin. That jawline is, I'm okay with that for now, but we can always change it. And then to mirror that, because again, this face is at an angle, it's facing away from us. We know that the eyes, the nose, and everything are a little bit squished because of the perspective change. The same thing is going to happen for the jawline. So this jaw has all of this space over here, but this side of the jaw is going to have a lot less space, right? Because we're not seeing that full plane of the face like we are for this one. So from here, we're going to cut up a little bit faster, and then we're just going to add a little bit of a bulge for that jawline instead of like that full sort of setup we had. And then we're going to give just a little bit of a cheek as well. And again, we can always erase, we can always fix, we can always change this because we're still drawing super light lines. We're still just drawing all of our pre-drawing stuff. Hey everybody, happy you're joining. So again, we're going to take a step back. We're going to look at this, and the head shape looks pretty okay. I think if anything, I would change this line right there. So because we can and we have free will, we're going to. We're just going to erase it a little bit. I'm even going to erase a little bit of that jaw too. And then we're going to carry this line again up through that cheek. Nice. That looks a little bit better for what I'm envisioning. And then we can just sort of add in a little bit of detail, a little bit of age lines, everything like that. But still, we're still working in that pre-drawing phase, and we're just adding in small little light lines, small little details, nothing too serious. We want to be able to erase at any point in this drawing. So I'm just going to add some age lines for him too. These glasses look solid. I don't think I need to change anything about them, but we are going to draw that arm that's going to connect behind the ear. We don't need to draw anything on this part, but we do need to draw just an indication of where his head ends, and that these glasses stick out a little bit. So we're going to draw just barely a line. We're not going to connect it to anything. It's just an indication line. And that's going to be that all covered. And then basically, since we have the eye and we have the nose and we have the glasses line, we know exactly where the ear needs to be. It can't be longer than the nose, and it has to start at the eye. So we can just throw in an ear like that, right? So that bottom of the ear lines up with the bottom of the nose, that top of the ear lines up with the eyeball, and that ear looks pretty accurate already just because we made sure that it was at the right spacing or the right spot of the eye and the nose. And then we can just throw in sort of a half-baked indication of the ear canal and whatever. And then this side of the ad, because we're facing away, you're not going to see all of the ear. You're probably going to see a little bit of it. So we're just going to throw in maybe like an earlobe or something just to fill out the drawing a little bit. We don't need anything super, super detailed on that ear, but just a little extra something for the kids back home. And then, now that we have the ear, I'm seeing that this jawline is a little bit too far away, so I'm going to cut that in just a little bit. I'm going to keep the chin how I want it. Mike Riggs, sup Mike Riggs? I'm doing good, how are you doing? And then we're going to move on to the eyebrows. So, like I did in this drawing, I sort of set up that, oh, by the way, Mike, did you see my drawing of bats? I don't know if you were here for it, but I drew her for you. I'll switch to that page in a second. But remember when I was doing this sort of, what do I even call it? The eyeball socket, like that shelf that sets up, and then we know that the eye is inset in the eye or in the skull, and then the brow kind of sticks out and away from us. That shadow is cast. Same thing here, but because we have the glasses blocking it, the eyebrow is going to be just barely above. So we're just going to add in just a small wispy eyebrow, almost like directly on top of the glasses line. And then because the face is tilted away from us, again, that perspective switch that we keep talking about this whole time, this eyebrow is going to look a lot smaller, like it's going to be squished like the eyes and the nose, and it's also going to be a little bit further away from that midline. So it's going to start about there, and then it's going to mirror that same shape on the other side, right like that. That makes sense? I'm fine in anyways. I had a request for tonight. Original First Lady of WWE, Miss Elizabeth. Mike, you're pulling out some crazy deep cut sports people. But yeah, we can draw her next. But yeah, so that eyebrow, you see how I spaced it away from the nose just a little bit? That's because the face is turned and it makes your drawing look so much more realistic when you can place the eyebrows exactly where they should be, right? We're going to draw just a little line for maybe he's pushing his eyebrows together a little bit. It looks kind of like he has a questioning face. And then we said he was bald, but we can give him a little indication of hair here. And then you can barely see his hair on this side too, right? But like that looks pretty solid. And all we did, we can just draw in a little bit of a neck and finish that off. But all we did, again, that same setup that we did with this one, we did all of the same exact things with this face. We had that midline, but it was at an angle. We had that nose line, which was at an angle. And then we had that mouth line, which was at an angle. And then we remembered that everything has to be sort of that box shape, that triangle shape, or that sphere shape. And then with all of that, using these triangle shapes, we set up an accurate nose. And then from the nose, we used it as perception and perspective to like make the eyes the correct size, the nose the correct size, and everything the correct size, right? So now that we have this fairly solid drawing, we can go in and we can darken up all these lines. All the lines that we're pretty happy with, you can come in, and now this is when sort of like the fun starts. And you can even use pen for this if you want to. I'm not going to just because I don't have the need. I think my dark pencil is plenty good for me for tonight. But if you're interested in doing like pen work and ink work, like go for it. Like that would be That would be awesome. And also all pen drawings look super cool to me. I just I don't want to bust out the pen right now. So we're just going back over everything that we drew was pre-drawing, right? So now we're just drawing all of our permanent lines and sort of our setup. And also when you come back in and you add dark lines on top of everything and really set it in stone, it gives your drawing a little bit of depth as well, because then you have the light lines from the pre-drawing and then the dark lines from the finishing touches, right? So we can add a little bit of color to the glasses, just like a little gleam. But there we go. Like, that's a pretty solid face. And it was all the same techniques that we used for this face, but at an angle. And we drew just a different character. And that's it. That's nice. How are we all doing? We got Mike on YouTube. We got a bunch of people on TikTok. We're chilling. I'm chilling. I'm gonna have a drink of water too. Anyone got any weekend plans? Anyone doing anything special on Saturday? Or are we all just hanging out and drawing? I've seen Cian loves to draw. You've been in here the whole time. Are you enjoying it? Are you learning something? Is anything awesome? We're gonna pop in. I gotta find a reference image for Mike. Mike wants a drawing of a WWE superstar. So we're gonna do that today. Okay, let's see. Miss Elizabeth. Oh, sweet. She looks crazy. All right, let's draw Miss Elizabeth. Okay. This seems like a pretty solid picture of her. Okay, she's got huge hair. This is gonna be awesome for you, Mike. Let's get this book out of the way. So, for Miss Elizabeth, we'll keep it right here. Again, we're going to start that same classic way with a big oval, right? And I'm going to draw this one a little bit bigger because when you're drawing real people and when you're drawing anything really, it is much simpler to draw big. You'll see people that draw comic books or people that draw any sort of like graphic novels, they draw on huge pieces of paper to get in all of that detail. And then when they scan that big piece, they shrink it down on the computer, and then that's what's printed. So like if you're ever looking through comic books or you're looking through any sort of picture book or graphic novel or whatever it is, and you see this like crazy amount of detail within like a panel or a page or a drawing, it's because they draw it like 10 times the size almost and then shrink it down later. So when you're drawing and you're starting out and you're trying to figure out how to draw certain shapes or certain people or whatever, like fill the page, like use your whole page. You don't need to do these face drawings so tiny like I'm doing it. Like it's doing a disservice to me to draw this small. So like if you're just practicing and you're working and you're trying to figure something out, like draw it big, and it's going to give you a lot more freedom to put detail wherever you want to, and it's going to give you a way better outcome because you're comfortably adding in all of the detail everywhere instead of really like zeroing in and trying to etch in these little tiny details on a face like that big versus this big, right? Like the more space you have, the more canvas you have to make a drawing, the better. So with this drawing, we'll start with an oval. Her face is also at an angle, so we're going to draw that eye line about there. We're going to draw the nose line about there, and we're going to keep all of these sort of curved and up. And then again, from that lesson that we learned on this drawing, the mouth, cutting the sphere into spaces and trying to get, the eye line correct, the nose line correct, and the mouth line correct. On this one, we figured out that every time we're drawing the mouth line, it's a little bit too low. So for this one, and what I did on this one is I'm bumping that mouth line up just a little bit from middle. Like if you see this line to the bottom of the drawing, that middle line is going to be about there, but I know that's going to be a little bit too far away from the nose, so I'm just bumping it up maybe 1/4 of an inch, right? So now we have a half line, and even I would put this line down a bit too. We have an eye line in the middle of the sphere, we have a nose line in the middle of that section that we just cut, and then we have that mouth line that we moved a little bit up because we know it's a little bit different than what we hope it is. So now, same thing, we're going to put in just indications of all of our details, right? I'm going to make sure this line is a little bit different. We're just putting in small ovals very lightly. Nothing is going to be permanent on this drawing until like the last minute or two, right? Everything we're drawing today, or all of these sketches, they all start with light lines up until the very end, and then that's when we sort of finish it, and that's when we add these dark lines that you see. But up until that point, we are going to keep it as light as possible, so when we do see mistakes and we see things going wrong, we can immediately erase them and fix those quick, right? So, again, same thing with this angle. We're going to draw the nose as a big triangle. So we have the nose there, and then because this face is at an angle, we're going to be able to see this side of the nose, right? So we're going to make sure that we're laying out that edge, and we're even going to see a little bit of the underside of the nose. So we're essentially turning this nose into a 3D object, just a bunch of simple shapes, nothing crazy. And then that, although it looks crazy, although it looks stupid, it's going to give our brain a bunch of reference points on where to put detail and where not to. So like already when I'm looking at this, I know that the front of the nose is never going to cross over this line, and I know that the nostrils are going to be about this whole half, and we're probably never going to see that nostril on the other side, right? So we have that sort of indication set up. And then we know that the mouth has to be from pupil to pupil. It can never be wider than that. So we're just going to put in a very light line to sort of indicate where we want our mouth to be. And then we're going to put in some light color for the lips. And then her mouth is going to be open a little bit. So we're going to add in some blank space and then a little bit more color for that bottom lip. But again, we're not doing anything permanent. We're not doing anything really solid. We are just moving through. Oh, hey, thanks for following. We're just moving through extremely slowly, and we're blocking in colors. We're blocking in simple shapes. We're just doing all of the baseline stuff because as we're sort of moving through this drawing and figuring it out, we want detail and everything to come in at the very end. We want things to look correct before we start making it look fun. So that's like the most important. Can you do shapes for anatomy? Yeah, I can do shapes for anatomy. I'll do it after I finish this drawing though. So with this nose, we're going to sort of session this nose a little bit now because it is sort of the highlight. And if we can get the nose right, then we can get both eyes and the mouth right. And the reason I say that is the human face is basically split up in eye widths. Like you could think of one eye as like 1 inch or 1 unit or whatever. And the human face has 5 units of that measurement. So we have like an eye width there for the actual eye, and then from the edge of the eye to the side of the head is going to be that same width, and then the nose is going to be that same width. The other eye obviously is going to be the same size, and then from there to the edge of the face is another like set, right? So there's 5 units of eyes. And we know if we can get the nose right and we can get the nose to look correct, we know then the eyes have to be about that same width everywhere, so then we can get the eyes perfectly correct too. So we're going to start on this nose. I'm just going to lay in a little bit darker of a color, but not too dark, right? And we're going to see just barely a little bit of that nostril, and then this nose is going to curve in to sort of that end point, and then it's going to pop up, and then we're going to be able to see that nostril about there, right? And then from here, we can draw that outer side nostril. And again, you see how that outer side nostril popped in and sort of landed on that plane that I set up earlier in that little circle. It's because that pre-drawing really works. It really shows you all of the planes of the face that you're drawing. So we know now that this nose, all of the front parts of the nose can't go past this line right here. This nostril is on the side of the face, so all of this is just going to be the side of the nose. Like nothing really else is going to happen on that side, and we really just have to focus on figuring out how this nose looks on the front. So I'm going to draw a little circle there, and I'm even going to erase some of the lines on the inside, because we know that the nose is going to be highlighted on the very tip, right? And then we can use that to our advantage too, to draw in a little bit of shaping like that. And that'll look better as we move on, but for now, we're pretty happy with that. So that nose for now, although it looks a little bit messy because we have all of that structure there, is fine. Like it looks proportional and we can tell that it's about the right size. So we're going to move on from that and we're going to start working on the eyes. And again, since the face is angled a little bit to the left, we know that we're seeing this whole right side of the nose, but we aren't going to see this whole other side of the nose. And so because of that, the same thing with this, the eye, the nose, and this eye are going to be squished a little bit because instead of facing us directly like this drawing, it's angled a little bit away. And if you look at my fingers when I do that, so like imagine an eyeball here and an eyeball here and a nose here, you can see the full spread. But when I move my fingers, now this eye, I'm only going to see a little sliver of that eye. I'm going to see a bunch of the nose, and then this eye is going to be a little bit warped and off to the side, right? Like you understand that perspective change of you can see everything wide and set up, but then when you turn it, now everything is going to be a little bit closer together. It's kind of like an optical illusion. But because of that, this eye, instead of starting, a little bit away from that nose, like we see here, it's going to be pretty much right up against the nose. So, this WWE superstar has pretty big eyes. So we're just going to lay in a little bit of that sort of almond shape right there. And again, we have like almost no space in between the nose and the eye start. And then this eye, we're going to have essentially all of this side of the nose and then a little bit of space because the head is turning away from us. So this eye can start a little bit further away than what we would usually do if we were drawing a direct on perspective, right? Everyone following? So we're going to add in that same sort of oval shape, and we're going to try and keep everything about the same height as this eye because we want this to look fairly symmetrical. And then we can sort of take a step back, and this is a really important part of whenever you're trying something new, or like especially drawing a face and doing this sort of method that I'm trying to teach of structure first, detail later. Every time you lay in a detail like that, or anytime you lay in something that feels sort of important, take a step back. Like always move away from your drawing, like physically move away from the drawing and look at it and see if things look off. If something looks totally unnatural, we know to fix it now. If something looks really perfect, then it's like, okay, I don't really need to think about that for now. I can move on to something else. With this drawing, this eye is sticking out to me as looking a little bit weird, a little bit off, and I can't put my finger on why. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase it, and I'm just going to try it again. And we're going to see if I can sort of fix or curb whatever I'm seeing that feels off. And we're going to see if just taking it from the top, just trying it one more time, can fix it. And already that looks a little bit more like what I wish it would have looked like in the beginning. So we're gonna let that run. We'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to it if it's not looking right. But like that is the power of this system, or the power of drawing like this, gives you so much freedom to just completely erase something, redraw it, and then again take a step back, like physically step away from your piece look at it. Does it look weird? If so, just retry it. If it looks great, dude, sick. Move on. So we're going to just slowly start etching in a little bit of detail around everything. All these lines are sort of setting up our like skull shape, if that makes sense. Like whenever you're drawing faces, it's important to remember the shape of the skull, and the shape of the skull has a big hole for the eyeball. And then within that big hole of the eyeball, you have your eye. So you can basically, if you're looking at me in the mirror, you can see that there's shadows above my eyes, and it's because my brow bone, my whole eye socket is like way bigger than the eye, and all of it goes into my head, right? So we know that there's going to be shadows underneath my eyebrows, and there's going to be a little bit of shadow on the sides of my eyes, and then light is going to hit this top part of my cheekbone because that isn't obstructed by any light, right? So whenever you're drawing people and you're doing this sort of structure, blueprinty drawing that I'm doing, you can add in these super light lines around the eye, and that's going to guide where you need shadow and where you need light. So from here, we'll just slowly add in a little bit of shadow under this brow bone. And again, like this, all we're doing is we're just drawing the eye socket. We're not doing anything else, and then we're adding in a little bit of shadow because we know that, you know, the eyebrow casts a shadow. And then from this, we can go in and we can add in a little indication of an eyelid. Eyelids usually fold. If not, you can see them sort of stretch out above the person's eye, as in this one. Like here, I'll give you a better look. So like in this one, you can see these two lines that sort of set up and showcase that the eyelid is there. But in this eye, it's more of a fold, right? So the eyelid goes in, and that's just basically whoever you're drawing, they're going to have different eyelids and structure around their eye. So it's just important to look out and watch and see. Some people have this sort of folded in eyelid, and then other people have that sort of wider spread out eyelid. So we'll just add in a little bit of detail and showcase that that eyelid there, just to make things look a little bit more realistic. And then because we drew this shadow for the brow bone, we know that the eyebrow has to go above that brow bone, right? Like very simply, like all of these structure points give us a foothold to go then and draw the next piece. Like everything is a puzzle, or like a little going back to moment, right? So we know that this brow bone, there has to be an eyebrow on top, so we can lay in just sort of an idea of an eyebrow here. We don't need to draw anything super detailed yet, but we know the eyebrow is going to be about there, right? And then same thing for this one, but if you remember, this face is pointed to the left. So this eyebrow is going to be a little bit smushed because of perspective, and it's going to be a little bit farther away from the eyebrow because there's more, again, that same thing that I was showing, an eyeball here, a nose here, and an eyeball here. As you turn it away, you see way more of everything that hits this way and way less of everything on this half of the perspective plane that you're drawing, right? So like if I have a nose sticking out right here, and then I turn this, I can see this half of the nose, or this whole side of the nose in the top, but I'm never going to see that left side because it's turned away and everything is either stretched or scrunched up. So because of that, sort of turning that lesson into an actual drawing piece, this eyebrow is going to be further over left because we're going to be able to see more of the forehead right here, and it's going to be a little bit smaller than this one because the face, we're not going to see this whole half of the head on this side because the face is turned. Does that make sense? Sick. So from here, I think the eyebrow is going to start about here, whereas in this one, it starts right at that eye line. This one is going to start just a half step over from that, right? So again, we're not drawing anything too permanent here. We can always change it. And then we're just going to lay in the idea of an eyebrow. And we can come in and we can change that. And already it looks a little bit weird and a little bit wonky, so I'm just going to erase that second half of it. I'm comfortable with how this one is starting, but we're just going to fix it a little bit as we're going. So that looks a lot more realistic to me. And again, like with this structure first, detail later, I can always do that. I can always go in, erase something, fix it up really quick, and then move back into the drawing. I don't have to restart the drawing. I don't have to spend minutes erasing. I don't have to do any of those sort of laborious tasks. I can just quickly, like, 2 swipes of an eraser, redraw it. Again, if it sucks again, I just do that same thing over and over and over again. And we do that all the way up until that final spot when we can add in all the detail that we want to. So I'm pretty comfortable with that eyebrow so far. I'm pretty comfortable with the nose. We can start adding in maybe the iris of this eye. Again, just like a little disc of color, nothing too crazy, nothing too permanent. A lot of times when you're drawing eyes, the iris will touch both the top and the bottom of the eyelid. Very rarely, or not very rarely, but usually people won't have white spaces around the tops and bottoms unless they're maybe like directly looking right at you. But we're just going to add in little discs of color. And again, we're keeping it very light. We're keeping it not permanent, because if for some reason halfway through this drawing I realize that the eyes are wrong, I don't want to have to erase a full disc of like really hard pencil, right? Like if I colored this in completely dark and then tried to erase it, it's never come off the paper. So keeping things light, keeping everything correct, we're just going to add in a little indication of that bottom eyelid. Not drawing bags on the eyes, but just like you can definitely see the line or the end of the eyelid on the bottom half, because again, the eyeball is a sphere and the eyelid wraps around that sphere, right? So these eyes look pretty solid. The nose looks pretty solid. We're now going to move on to the mouth. So we're just going to draw on that little teardrop shape there. And again, remember that same perspective that we were talking about, how if I'm looking directly at a face and I have an eyeball here, a nose here, and an eyeball here, I can see everything, right? And I can see it all flat and plain. But at the second I start turning that plane away, now everything is a little bit scrunched up. I can only see certain angles of every piece, and I can only see sort of the perspective that I'm drawing at. So with that in mind, and as we're thinking about that, this mouth, whereas on this drawing you can see sort of that full length of mouth, this one, since it's turned this way, we're only going to see like the short side of this mouth, and we're going to see a long side of this mouth. So it's really smart when you're drawing like this to keep this sort of perspective going, and always second guess yourself and always guess and check, because it would be so easy to draw a full mouth here, but that would make the drawing look off and weird and different. So what we're doing is remembering that the mouth has to end, or like both ends of the mouth, like both sides of the mouth end at the pupil. So from pupil down, we know that the mouth has to end about there, and then from pupil down, we know the mouth has to end there. And we know that the middle of the mouth is right underneath the nose. So because we're doing all this setup and we're doing all of this blueprinting, we immediately understand, just because we did everything correctly so far, like this half of the mouth is way shorter than this half. And like that would make sense, because again, we're doing that perspective switch where you can see everything flat here, but then when you start turning it, things start warping. So this is just like a better way, or another way to showcase that this mouth is at a perspective switch, it's at an angle. So we're gonna come in, and again, lips are just value. They're not outlined, they're not they're not cartoony, they're not anything. It's just a shade of gray, or if you're using colored pencils, it would be a shade of pink. And then we have that sort of bottom of the lip is going to be a little bit darker. And the reference drawing I'm using, she's smiling, so I'm going to leave some space for teeth. And we can sort of add in just a small indication that teeth are in there. We don't want to spend too much time on teeth because I hate drawing teeth, but we'll just add something in there like that. And then for that bottom lip, again, it's just another shade of gray, or if you're using colored pencil, it's another shade of colored pencil. And then you can get a pretty solid shadow underneath that lip and a nice highlight on top of that bottom lip, because the light catches lips differently. And then we can sort of throw in just some face lines. A lot of times when you're drawing faces, it's really smart to do little tiny like age lines and face lines as you go, because it gives you a lot more reference as you're drawing to sort of figure out where I need things and where I need things to look correct. So by adding little tiny details like around the eyes or around the mouth. Why did my Bryant Baby lock screen and look Labubu low-key serve? What? Bryant Baby lock in, seek in, look. What are you even, in your opinion, how much passion play in the part of learning to draw, if that makes sense? If you're still here, sorry I didn't see your message earlier, passion plays a huge role in anything that you're practicing. And I think that's where discipline separates people, is basically if you're super passionate about something, practice doesn't feel like practice. So as you're drawing, if you love drawing, it's like your time to unwind. It's your Zen moment. It's like what you enjoy doing. So practicing for an hour a day doesn't really feel like work. But if you hate drawing, but you like realize that you need to get better at it for some reason, maybe it's for a project or it's for work or it's like what you think you want to do, but it's just like so angering and so stressful, like then passion plays a huge role in that, because you're constantly going to be thinking, God, I don't want to be doing this. Like, I hate doing this. Why am I doing this? So yeah, I think passion plays a huge role in learning anything. Again, why did my Brant Baby lock in, seek in, look, Labubu, low-key serve? I'm low-key flip-flopping. Flopping. You're speaking the language of the gods. Why'd my Brant Baby lock baby? Somebody tell me why my Brant Baby lock baby. Okay, so back to the drawing. We can add in a little bit of shadow on this nose. We're feeling pretty comfortable and pretty confident with all of these drawing points so far. I'm going to add in a little bit of a darker line on that bottom lip to give it some depth, a little bit of shadow. Same thing on this very bottom lip. We can sort of put in a little bit more detail on the teeth just cause. And that's pretty much fine for the mouth for now. Yeah, you are speaking tongues. It's insane. Why did my Brant Baby lock baby and seek Labubu? I'm low-key serving. I'm low-key flip-flopping. You're all over the place, man. You're flopping. Okay, so back to the drawing. We have pretty solid eyes. We have a pretty solid nose. We have a pretty solid mouth. Things are looking correct. Things are looking like they're proportional. Things are looking like they are following the right perspective. We can see this half of the nose and the front of the nose. We'll never be able to see that left side of the nose because the face is turned. The lips look pretty solid. They're just value. This side of the mouth is going to be a lot shorter than this side of the mouth because that whole face is turned. The eyebrows look about correct. They seem like they are long enough. And so now that we have all of this structure and all of this detail and all of these sort of setup points, and like we're blueprinting this drawing, we can start moving into the final stages. So with that, I'm going to start mapping out and trying to draw this side of the head. And this character that I'm drawing has a cheek there, and then not like a crazy strong jawline, but enough. And then we'll put like the chin about there. And again, like I'm taking this part just as slowly as all the other parts. We can come up with that jawline there. And I'm just taking my time here. The second something needs to change, we'll change it and then we'll keep moving on. But for now, it's like the more you can mitigate failure, the better. So we just want all of this to move as slowly as possible, because the second we see a red flag or the second we see something pop out of proportion, we can immediately erase it and we can retry it. Like that's the power of this drawing technique and this method is you can basically always fix a mistake. There's never going to be a point when you're drawing like this that things go too far, things go out of whack, right? So I'm already noticing that I'm adding a little bit too much cheek, and I'm even going to start erasing some of the blueprinting that I've been doing, because although those lines are giving me like good information, some of them are messing me up. So it's okay to start erasing and start figuring out which lines you want to keep and which ones you don't. So with this, we're going to follow it down into the chin, and that looks way better. And then we're going to basically, we're going to add just like a little, you remember in this drawing when we had the chin and we added these little extra lines to show sort of the difference between the front of the face and the side of the face? The same thing with this one. I'm going to draw just a little line that's going to tell us that, you know, this is still front of face, and now we're talking about the side of face here. So we're going to draw up there, and then the jawline is going to cut in. And then the ear is going to be from, again, like we've been talking about, the ear starts at the eye and then it goes down to the bottom of the mouth. So we'll just draw in an idea of the ear, and that also helps us map out where our jawline is going to start and go, right? So that's looking pretty solid. And then that top of the head is going to connect up with this line that we drew previously. And that's looking pretty solid. We don't need to worry about these top lines too much because they're going to be covered with hair, right? So that's just for us to make sure that the head is the correct size and the correct shape. And we know that it's the correct shape because we have sort of the eyes drawn, the nose and the mouth all drawn to proportion. So we know that this has to be about the same size from eyebrow to top of head. And with that, like, things are starting to look pretty solid. So we can start going in on the parts that we're really confident in. We can start laying in those dark, almost permanent lines. Again, nothing's too permanent yet. We can still sort of erase, but we can sort of get ahead of, you know, what we're trying to draw and these permanent lines and sort of finishing and moving into that detail section that I was talking about previously. Like, we've spent this whole time doing setup, and now it's time to sort of start laying in this drawing and figuring out how we want things to look as it's finishing. So we're going to add in some eyelashes. Nothing too crazy. It's really easy to add too many eyelashes. So what I always do is I just sort of indicate that there's eyelashes, and then that's plenty. Like, that's all we need. We can go into this iris, and we can darken these up. That'll make the drawing look a little bit more realistic as well. Nothing too crazy. Again, I'm not digging into the paper. I'm just like adding in a little bit of value. I'm still taking my time. We're still in drafting mode. We're just a lot further into drafting mode than we were in the beginning. And then I'm going to darken up this nose line because I really like how the nose turned out. We'll finish that up. We'll add just a little indication that, you know, this is the front of the nose. Same thing with the lips. This character is wearing lipstick, so we can darken these up a little bit. Again, adding in those dark lines where we need them. Beautiful. Okay, that's looking pretty realistic. It's looking pretty solid. And so now with all of this, we can sort of go in and we can start maybe focusing a little bit more on those age lines and the face lines that everyone has, just to make this look a little bit more realistic. The human face has like shadows everywhere. There's wrinkles everywhere, even if it's not like a serious wrinkle, but you know, they're always there. And if you can figure out how to draw them pretty accurately, you can always get a way more fun and a way more interesting face design out of it. So we know that the cheekbone is going in about there, so I'm going to add a little bit of shadow on there. We'll throw in a little bit of shadow there. On the top, we'll add in just a little something to make things interesting, and then basically the rest of this face is going to be in hair. We'll add in a little bit of a shadow on the bottom too, just because that's how things work. And like that, from, if you remember, that was just one big oval, and then we slowly kept adding in more and more detail, right? So now we're going to go into the hair, and this character just has big, huge hair, so we're going to first focus on big, broad shapes of the hair. We're not going to focus on singular strands at all. So I know that she's got huge curtain bangs, so we're just going to lay in all of these big, big shapes, right? And then this big hair comes out. We're going to cover up this guy's face a little bit. It comes out, it's a little bit wavy, so we're going to add in some waves. It's going to go off the page. And then it's going to go all the way down past her head. We can even add in a little bit of a neck here, just so it helps us understand where the hair is going to go. The hair is going to come out from there. And again, just like big, big, broad shapes, especially when you're drawing big, wavy, curvy hair like this. Same thing right here. And we'll put in like an indication of her neck there, so we understand that it's not all hair. And then with those big shapes that we just drew, you can just sort of lay in chunks of texture, right? Like we don't need this hair to look like hyper realistic. We just need it to look as if it's flowing in certain ways. So to do that flowy sort of look, you're just picking big sections or triangles or circles, and you're just sort of adding detail to those sections. And then same with up here, those big curtain bangs, we're just like adding in indication of what this hair looks like. We're not really focused on having things look specific or hyper realistic. We just want little chunks of texture and little chunks of flowiness, so then it looks at least like a little bit realistic, right? So I'm just switching the direction of my sketch lines just to sort of prove that this hair is big, it's got a bunch of volume, and it's got a bunch of texture everywhere. And the hair even covers up that ear, so we're just going to put that in there. And then all of a sudden, that drawing's done. Isn't that nice? Doesn't that work perfectly? We've got that big hair, we've got the detailed face, and again, it did the same system as that face and that face. We started with a huge oval. We cut that oval in half for the eye line. We cut that half section in half again for the nose line. And then we drew the line right underneath it for the mouth. And then we just slowly added in a bunch of structure. We really focused on perspective. We really focused on sort of the proportion of everything. And as we were going through all of that structure, the detail and everything just sort of started popping up out of nowhere. Like as you're adding more and more structure, and as you're adding in more and more detail, for the lack of a better word, like all of the parts that you want to draw in the very beginning just sort of happen. And that's the power of drawing in this mode or in this way with this technique, is you don't have to go into a drawing and immediately finish it or make it permanent or make it look like a comic book. Because as you're going and as you're sort of shading and adding in all the shadows, like that's when all of those details and all of the items like the eyelids and the mouth lines and all of those things, like they just end up happening slowly and more correctly, instead of me just like, well, I need to draw a face right here, so I'm going to draw the eyes there, I'm going to draw the nose and then the mouth. Like, you just get these permanent lines that you can never fix, but if you do this, these are pretty fire. Thank you so much. I've just been teaching how I do it. If you do it this method, or like this system of just like slowly etching your way through, you'll get all of the fun details that you want. It's going to take a little bit more time, but then you end up with like solid drawings. So yeah, that's about it. I've been streaming for an hour and a half already, and I think I'm done. I've taught as much as I can in an hour and a half. We did these 3 faces. I just went over all of the things that we taught. If you've been watching, please give me a follow. That would be awesome. If you don't want to, that's fine too. I am going to be doing this every once in a while, and I'll be posting videos too, but thanks for hanging. It really means a lot that you guys are liking and following and texting and all that stuff. So thanks for watching. Means a lot to me. See ya. Nice. Okay. Mike, I would like to see Lauren Betts drawing from last night. I gotcha. But does that look like her? Does that feel like, you know? This is the, here, I'll show you the reference. Actually, no, I can't show you the reference. I was going from a reference drawing and it seemed like it was pretty solid. And then here's Lauren Betts. This one, not as much detail as the, nice. Thank you. Not as much detail as Miss Elizabeth, but like still pretty solid. I was actually very proud of this drawing whenever it came out. I thought the hair came out really nicely and all of the shadows on her face. She's got some crazy cheekbones. But yeah, that was that drawing, and then now we've got Miss Elizabeth. I'm glad you stuck around. That's badass. Did you like the stream? I forgot. Do you draw too, Mike? Oh, I gotta plug in my phone. I'm also excited whenever you have another crazy deep cut sports star or entertainer for me to draw. I'd love to draw it, but I have 2 drawings. Oh, sick! I'm glad. It's helpful. But with that, I gotta run. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching all the time, Mike. It really means a lot to me. But I think that's it. That's it for tonight. Think of someone you want to see me draw, and then the next time I'm live, I'll draw them, because this is fun. It's like, it's fun when you give me ideas to draw. So, with that, I'm out of here. See ya.